Hello Exile, you're watching Altec 2K Gaming. My preparation for this league start could have been better. Unfortunately I had both toothache and the sniffles, but I did manage to get my character into maps without Withering Step, so I knew it would work, at least in white maps. In order to make up for this lack of preparation, I decided it was time to check out other people's builds. And I have to say, this is the most powerful and fun build I think I've ever played at League Start. It really is just so good. So how have the first 5 days of the league gone? I had the most ridiculous luck on day 1 and I dropped 3 6 links in Act 3, which I didn't think was even possible. Now I was hoping that was going to be the start of things to come. Unfortunately I was wrong. Despite being the player with the most playtime in our guild by quite a margin, I'm still to drop a Divine, whereas everyone else has already had one. However, by grinding Chaos, crafting items, and selling drops, I'm up to about 2 Divine and 240 Chaos. Now because of the frankly overpowered nature of this build, I've only actually bought a chest and a helmet. Everything else I have crafted, so on this build so far I've spent about 140 Chaos. Now I do have a fairly good claw, it's got to be said, but I did craft this with essences. I have crafted 3 just like it, which all sold for around 50 Chaos, and I've got another 3 up for sale. Now on the screen while I've been talking, you've been seeing this build in action. What do you think? If you are tempted to play it, then I can highly recommend it. As I say, it's the most fun I've had at the league start. It's just so fast at mapping. And boss damage isn't terrible either once you get the hang of it. By the end of day 2, we just reached red maps. By the end of day 3, the 2 pinnacle bosses had seen their demise, and we had 2 of the 4 watchstones. Fast forward to now and the character has reached level 93 and is still willing to go further. So let's answer the following questions for you. Whose and what is this build? What are its pros and cons? And do I recommend you try it? But before we get into that, if you've enjoyed this video or found it useful, then please tickle that like button, it'll like it a lot. And if you found yourself washed up on my shore more than once, why not consider subscribing? So what is the build? It's a Vaal Venom Gyre elemental build. It uses claws with Nightblade, so it uses the broken elusive effect, which isn't quite so broken anymore because you can't reset it, but it does give you some ridiculous crit at the start of its run. Now this creator I don't believe I've ever watched before until now, and I actually found a recommendation on Palstron's channel. The guide is from Kobe Black Mamba, and I'm incredibly impressed by the guide itself. It's very detailed on how it works. Now there is also a leveling guide that accompanies it. I didn't follow this to the letter because I wanted to save some respec points, and it leveled just fine. Now what do we level with? We level with Poison Concoction and we switch over once we reach maps. By this point we'll already have our first 3 ascendancies. The first and third ascendancies are good for both Poisonous Concoction and Venom Gyre, but the second ascendancy isn't any good for Poisonous Concoction, so it is a bit of a waste if you get it early. Okay, how does this build cope with maps? It's amazing. I'd give it an S. Map boss killing. Despite it being good, I'm gonna give it an A+. Because it's a bit finicky to get used to, and also it's really easy to screw it up, which I've done several times, which makes the boss fight a little bit longer than it ought to be. Okay, the bigger endgame bosses. I've killed Black Star, Endless Hunger, Eater of Worlds, and Searing Exarch. Overall, these bosses didn't give me any problems, so I don't anticipate any of the other bosses giving me a problem, except maybe the Minotaur, which has a really strong physical slam, and I don't have enough physical mitigation yet. The only slight downside is because our regeneration is so dire, we're gonna have to use 2 flasks during the boss fights to actually get enough health and sustain to run them. Now I'm sure as we get better weapons, our damage will increase and this need will go away, but right now it is a bit of an issue. Survivability, I'm going to rate this as a B. Natural regen is a bit lacking, as I mentioned in big boss fights, but once we're actually in a fight and we're moving around frequently, we're not going to die very often because our blades give us so much life on hit. Now I have occasionally been one shot just before the fight begins, just before your blades come out. If something hits you just off the edge of the screen, you're going to die because you've got nothing coming in. And I do want to stress that these grades are as of day 5 with practically no investment. I am pretty convinced if you sink a load of money into this, that the build is going to function extraordinarily well. So how does the build fare against the league mechanic? It's actually fairly good, and I'm sure it will be even better once I increase the damage. It should be stressed, however, that the normal way of killing bosses, which is to name lock them and use whirling blades backwards and forwards until they die, just doesn't work in this scenario, because your resolve will get absolutely hammered. For this reason, it's not quite as nice as when it's mapping, but it can be done, you just have to be careful. So far I got to the end of the 2nd floor and everything's going reasonably well. Now I was one of those people who didn't do the quests in either Act 2 or Act 7, so it was a bit slow to start with. Those quests really should have been easier to find. Shout out to Flying Tuna on Discord, who made us aware that these quests even existed. Without them, we'd be plodding along, unable to do much at all. I will be working on a guide for the league mechanic and hope to get it out as soon as possible. So all that is left for me to add is a big thank you to Kobe Black Mamba for an amazing League Start build guide. Links in the description. And with that, thank you for watching, and I will catch you next time.